Javon left the night before Valentine's Day. No note, no goodbye. Just the sound of the garage door closing and the soft thud of the front door sealing behind him, like the punctuation at the end of yet another unfinished sentence. I set the table for two anyway, out of habit maybe or stubborn hope. The wine glasses caught the flicker of the candles I lit too early. Dinner was quiet, just the rhythmic tick of the antique clock in the hallway and the distant hum of a radiator trying its best to warm an empty room. I didn't even like lamb, but I'd made it the way he liked, rosemary crusted, roasted slow. He hadn't said a word about the last meal I cooked. I thought maybe this time he would notice. I kept glancing at the clock. 7 became 8. 8 melted into 9. By 10, the candles had burned out, leaving behind stubs and a faint scent of wax and smoke. I sat in the silence long after the food had gone cold, my fork untouched. I should have known. I did know. But knowing doesn't soften the sting. Upstairs, the bed was too large, too cold. His side remained perfectly made, untouched, like it always did when he traveled for work, or when he chose the guest room instead, which was often these days. We hadn't kissed in over 3 months. We hadn't touched, really touched, in even longer. I curled on my side, clutching a pillow that smelled faintly of detergent and distant memories. I hated that my body still missed him, that somewhere inside, I still reached for scraps. It's strange what becomes normal when you stretch out your silence long enough. Morning came wrapped in gray clouds and frost. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the garden Javon paid a landscaping service to maintain but never stepped into. My hands wrapped around a mug of tea I didn't want. The mail clattered through the slot in the door. A single card lay among the bills. Bright red envelope. My name handwritten on the front. For a moment, my chest fluttered. Maybe he remembered. But when I turned it over, the handwriting wasn't Javon's. It was Cale's. Inside was a simple message written in tidy script. For when the world forgets you, know that I don't. My throat tightened. I pressed the card to my chest and let my eyes close. It was nothing. Just a card. Just kindness. But kindness felt like oxygen when you'd been holding your breath for years. That night, I lit one candle. Just one. I didn't make dinner. I didn't set the table. But I held that card in my lap like it was a lifeline. Because maybe, just maybe, someone still saw me. The doorbell rang just after sunset. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew it was him. Cale had a way of showing up when I was at my lowest, like he could feel the fractures through the walls. He stood on my porch with a bottle of wine in one hand and that quiet, knowing look that always made me feel both seen and unbearably exposed. "Didn't think you'd be alone tonight," he said softly, stepping inside before I could gather the breath to respond. He didn't ask. He never did. Cale just walked in like he belonged, shrugged off his coat, and placed the wine on the kitchen counter. He didn't even look at the table I'd left half set the night before. Didn't glance at the cold remains of the lamb still sitting in the fridge like a symbol of every word I never said. Instead, he poured us both a glass and gestured toward the couch. I followed, bare feet quiet on the hardwood floor. I sat on one end. He sat on the other. Between us, an arm's length of space and years of silence. We talked at first like strangers trying to find safe ground. Art, politics, the weather. He told me about a new client. A teenager, anxious and angry and full of stories they didn't know how to tell. I listened, grateful for his voice filling the spaces I usually left empty. But it couldn't last. It never did. "Why do you stay?" he asked quietly, not looking at me. My stomach twisted. I swirled the wine in my glass and stared into it like it might hold answers I didn't have. I could have said I loved Javon, that I believed in vows, that things would change. But love isn't supposed to feel like starving. So I lied. It's complicated. Cale looked at me then, really looked, like he could see every bruise beneath my ribs that even I didn't know were there. His jaw clenched just a little, not in anger, in pain. For me. You don't have to pretend with me, Mal, he said. I'm not pretending, but I was. We both knew it. The silence between us grew heavy. Not awkward, just full. Like it carried every word I didn't have the courage to say and every truth he wouldn't force me to. I don't want to talk about Javon, I murmured, voice cracking on his name. Cale nodded. Okay. And just like that, he let it go. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough not to push. We finished the bottle. I didn't realize I was crying until he reached over and brushed a tear from my cheek. His fingers lingered for a breath too long. He didn't speak. Neither did I. But for the first time in months I felt warm. He touched my wrist. Barely a graze of skin against skin, but it lit something in me I thought had long since turned to ash. I froze. Not because I was afraid, but because the sensation felt foreign, almost sacred. Like stepping into sunlight after years of overcast sky. My body, traitor that it was, leaned instinctively toward him. My mind caught up too late, panicking, dragging me back into the prison of loyalty I'd built around myself. I pulled away. Not far. Just enough to make it hurt. Cale's eyes didn't chase my retreat. He sat very still, watching me like I was a delicate thing trying to decide whether to shatter or bloom. His expression wasn't smug. It wasn't hungry. It was something else entirely. Soft, patient, devastating. I've wanted you since the day Javon brought you home, he said, voice quiet as a confession at a funeral. My breath caught, hitched, faltered. I stared at him, at the man who had always been the only real warmth in the Thorne family. The man who remembered how I took my tea and always opened doors without slamming them. Who hugged with both arms. Who looked at me like I mattered. Like I wasn't invisible, even when I tried to be. Anger. That's what I was supposed to feel. Fury. Disgust. A surge of righteous shame. But all I felt was the terrifying rush of wanting him back. I stood, turning my back to him, pretending to busy myself with the empty wine glasses. I needed something to hold that wasn't him. My hands shook. You can't say things like that, Cale, I said. Why not? Because I'm married to your brother. You're wearing a ring, he said. You haven't been married in years. His voice cracked a little on the last word, like the weight of what he said bruised him too. I love him, I whispered, not even believing myself anymore. Cale stood too, slow and deliberate. Then why do you flinch every time he touches you? I swallowed hard, shame and grief pooling in my chest like cold water. You don't get to say that. I do, he said, because I've watched you disappear, inch by inch, year after year. And I can't. He stopped, voice thick. I can't watch you forget how to breathe. The silence between us stretched, taut and trembling. I turned back around. He was closer now, but not close enough to touch. We stood in that sacred space between breaths, where everything we wanted lived, but nothing could be said aloud. I saw it then, the ache in his eyes. The hunger, yes, but deeper than that. The ache to give, not just take. To heal. To hold. And for the first time I wanted to be held. Not by obligation. Not out of guilt. But because it was safe. Because it was him. We kissed like we were trying to breathe through each other. Not just lips, no. It was mouths, hands, hearts. Years of quiet ache unraveled into desperate, trembling touch. I don't know who leaned in first, only that the world narrowed until it was just him and me, drowning in a kiss that tasted like overdue truth. It wasn't just passion. It wasn't lust, though there was heat. And it wasn't revenge, though pain hovered at the edges like smoke. It was something purer, something terrifyingly close to love. He touched me like he was asking permission with every breath. Like I wasn't fragile, but sacred. My body didn't flinch. It opened, bloomed, responded to the kind of hunger that wasn't about possession, it was about recognition. For once, I didn't feel like something to be tolerated. I felt wanted. We didn't speak much. Words would have cheapened it. He led me gently, always watching my face. And when we moved together, slow and reverent, there were moments I forgot the rest of the world existed. There was just this bed, these hands, this warmth, finally mine. But guilt, of course, was patient. It waited until the after. When we lay side by side, breathing into the quiet, the weight of what we'd done curled around my ribs and squeezed. I stared at the ceiling, heart still pounding. The ghost of Javant's name flickered at the edge of my mind. But it was Kale's name I whispered into the dark. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember waking up alone. The sheets were still warm, still smelled faintly of him. Paint and pine and the cologne he wore when he was trying not to care too much. But he was gone. No note, no sound, just silence. I sat up slowly, the ache in my muscles a tender reminder that last night wasn't a dream. I wanted to tell myself it meant nothing, that we made a mistake, that I was weak and he was hurting, and we both crossed a line we swore we wouldn't even see. But none of that was true. It meant something, maybe everything. I moved through the day like someone watching their life happen through glass. I made tea. I answered emails. I folded laundry that wasn't even mine. I did all the things a good husband should do while wearing the face of someone whose heart had just been cracked open and painted in color. And still the silence roared. Because last night wasn't just the night I crossed a line. It was the night I realized I hadn't felt alive in years. Javon returned on a Tuesday. No warning. No apology. Just the sound of keys in the lock and a suitcase thudding against the doorframe like nothing had changed. He walked in smelling of expensive cologne, someone else's perfume, and the stale air of foreign hotels. I sat on the couch with a book I hadn't touched in hours, and he barely looked at me before disappearing into the bedroom. He didn't ask where I'd been. He didn't care. That night I set the table again, out of habit, not hope. 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine. He sat across from me, scrolling through his phone, answering emails between bites of salmon I seasoned with resentment. His wedding band caught the light, but not his attention. He didn't notice I'd stopped wearing mine. For the first few minutes, I tried to play along. I asked about his trip. He gave me bullet points, meetings, hotel bars, a spa he said he didn't enjoy but somehow still smelled like. I laughed at a story I didn't hear. He never looked up. And then, somewhere between the second glass and the forced dessert, I saw it. I really saw it. Not just him. 2 strangers sharing a last name and a mortgage, not a life. I looked at his face and felt nothing. No ache, no anger. Just a soft, surprising emptiness. Like the final ember of something long extinguished. I thought about Kale. Not just the night. Not just the kiss. But the way he listened. The way he looked at me like I mattered, even in silence. Especially in silence. I thought about the way I used to brace myself for Javant's touch. Then flinch when it never came. I thought about the years I spent shrinking just to fit into the corners of his life. And then I thought, maybe I never really loved him. Maybe I loved the idea of him. The man he pretended to be. The life we painted in picture frames but never lived inside. Maybe I mistook safety for love. Routine for commitment. Silence for peace. Javon cleared his throat and asked if I was done pouting. I looked him in the eye and smiled, gently, like someone saying goodbye without saying the words. I think I'm just done, I said. He blinked, confused, then scoffed, said something about drama. got up and poured himself another drink. But I didn't follow. I sat at that table a little longer, the wine untouched, the candles flickering low. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I let the silence settle like dust on ashes. Because the marriage was over. It just took me this long to admit it had already burned. Cale came back on a Sunday morning. The kind of morning where the world was quiet, not out of peace, but waiting for something to be said, or broken or healed. He didn't knock. He just walked in, carrying that same calm gravity he always did, like the room changed shape to fit around him. My heart remembered him before my voice did. We stood in the hallway for a long time. The air between us tasted like memory, raw and bittersweet. I won't pretend what we did wasn't wrong, he said finally, eyes steady. But loving you has never felt like a mistake. And just like that, something cracked open inside me. Not with drama, not with fireworks, just a quiet surrender. I didn't fight it. I let myself want him. That night, we sat on the living room floor, surrounded by old photo frames I never had the courage to take down. We didn't talk about Javon. We didn't need to. The silence between us had weight, but not the kind that crushed. More like a blanket we'd both finally decided to climb under. He held my hand, and I let him. I let myself lean into the warmth. I let myself believe that maybe love could be soft. Not perfect, not pure, but chosen. Real. 1 year later, we live in a quiet coastal town. A place where nobody knows our pasts unless we tell them. And even when they whisper, because people always whisper, we don't flinch. We bought a small cottage with chipped paint and a view of the ocean that stretches into forever. I built a studio out back with my own hands. Paint-stained, clumsy, and perfect. It's filled with light and color. And for the first time in years, I create for no one but myself. Cale teaches yoga at the community center and volunteers as a grief counselor on weekends. He says helping others helps him, and I see it. The way his shoulders relax when someone else's pain is heard. He reads to me every night. His voice has become my favorite sound. Sometimes, in the stillness, I remember what it was like before. Walking on eggshells in a house that was never home, loving someone who never looked back. I don't feel anger anymore, just a soft kind of grief. Like mourning the version of myself I had to let die to finally feel alive. The world still whispers. We're a scandal to some, a story to others. But I've stopped listening. Because when he holds me now, there's no more shame. Just warmth. Just breath. Just truth. And truth, I've learned, feels a lot like freedom.